In this lesson, we're going to look at lathing and sweeping. So this is quite an interesting command, especially for architecture. And you'll see that there are a whole lot of areas that have these sections with profiles that are pre-done. And we also have things like columns and such, which are circular objects that have a certain profile. So for all of these, we're going to be using the lathe and sweep command. So I'm going to do the example for one or two of them and then pause the video while I finish up the rest, since the principle will apply to all of it. So I will just show it to you once in each case, and then you'll pretty quickly get the idea. So first of all, I'm going to start with these main columns. We know that they sit on square bases, which is this part here. So that's going to be modeled separately. And we can do that by, first of all, starting with the square form that you see on the CAD plan. So using the snap command, we're going to take that and then just draw a ordinary rectangle. So nothing too difficult there. Now the next thing to do is to draw the outline of the entire column. Now one way you could do it is that you could manually draw and redo the arcs and radii, or you could actually take the CAD geometry, and just like we did before with the roads, with the pavements, we could just go Control V, make a copy of it, isolate that, and then just go and extract those few lines that you actually want. So in our case, I'm just going to go and select the outline, which is all of this. And I'm going to do the same thing up here, deselecting those. So then all you need to do is go Control I, hit delete, and then you have your spline, which has now been extracted out of the CAD geometry. Now this spline, you can go and in your modifier just look at lathe, so LA, enter. And what you would want to do now is right click and then with your axis just adjust where that axis is. Now I'm going to move that in manually, but if you really do want to be precise, you can have a look at what the coordinate is for the halfway distance between the two maximum points. So I'm just going to do this by eye, since I'm not too fussed about getting this too perfect. So I'm just going to use the spinner to manually click up until I see that shape being correct. So with that done and out the way, I can take the rectangle that I created at the bottom and I can make a copy of it for the top. It can be an instance actually, and manually I will then move it into place. And the same thing can happen here. Here we have something that represents a so-called sculpture that you would have. Instead of me importing a really detailed sculpture, which I was thinking of doing, I'm just going to go and draw this manually, so you can see the two different approaches. You can see how much more difficult it is when you start to try to copy what something has been done like in AutoCAD. So here I'm just tracing and dragging out. Right, so here I would actually have to go and edit all of these lines separately, and it would actually just be quite a nightmare to even imagine doing this manually. So I really wouldn't recommend it. Hence why, if you do have a custom profile, always just try to do that little copy trick from AutoCAD. But anyway, I will leave this as it is. I'm not going to adjust it to infinity, and I will go and copy this lathe. I can actually just go and drag it across, and I hope that it lands on that object. Yeah. So again, I grab the axis, and I'm just going to adjust that axis manually to create this form that I want here. Now for this shape here, we want a kind of sphere shape, so I can just use a standard primitive, go ahead and create a geosphere, either from the center or diameter, whatever you have. You can just go and snap that onto there. And once you have those objects in place, you can select them all, and then you can go across into your perspective view and then move them across into your plan. So at this point you want to go back and turn on your plan. So plan general, I believe it is. And we can look in our top view and we can just position that to be slightly in front of the building. So I'm just going back into perspective here. And these rectangles that we created, we want to extrude them. So if I just go across EXT enter, and I will use 1 meter just for time being, and I'll move it back by 0.5 meter just so that it can be centered. This one actually here we can delete since it is standing on this base, and then we can go and adjust this base to fit the height of the column. So here you can either do it very geometrically using numbers or just by eye, looking at your elevation. So I'm going to just drag this back slightly. And here we have the base for our columns. Now, one thing you'll notice quite often what happens with the lathe tool is that you will actually have a black object, and all the polys will actually be inverted. So what we want to do in this case is you can either go and flip the polys, or you can go back down to your editable spline and just reverse that editable spline. Same thing that was happening with our pavements. You can also check that your material is actually not black. In some cases that is the case. Another easier way, actually, if you don't want to go to the editable spline, is to just go into your lathe, and you can just use the flip normals tool. So all 3 of those are perfectly fine. Either or will be the quickest one depending on what you're creating. So there you have it. Those are the objects. So what we want to do now after that is we just want to mirror them across to the other side, and we can continue from there. So just before this video is finished, I want to go and do a similar thing with the profiles, but this time we're going to have a look at the banding. So the banding will be done in 2 ways. If I just isolate the facade again, the CAD facade, you can either have banding which is linear, or you can have banding that traces around a shape. So in both cases it's pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to draw a line, corner and corner, initial and drag, and just using snaps I'm going to draw out that line there, and I'm going to go and draw out that line there. So the result is that I have a straight line for the windowsill, and I have a sort of U-shaped line for the window molding that's going to go around the top. So again, with my CAD, I want to extract out these 2. So I'm going to go Control V, and I'm going to select these 2, and then using Control I, just delete the rest. Then I'm going to take this one here and just detach that. So what I'm left with is these 2 spline objects. I can go into my pivots and then just center to object so that I can see where those pivots are. So the one that's left behind is the original CAD, and these are the ones that I'm going to now be working with. So the molding that we're going to use for this sill is actually this one here. And the molding, this profile is actually for the bottom there, so I'm going to leave that alone. And the molding that I'm going to use for the outside is this shape here. Since it is a plain rectangle, you can just go ahead and measure up, see what it is. This we know is 20.2 meters by 0.03, so it's 3 centimeters by 20 centimeters. So looking at those numbers, I can just go and use the sweep tool, SW enter, and from angle choose bar, and then just type in those parameters that you have. So your length in this case will be 0.03, that's the 3 centimeters, and then your width will be 0.2. Then all we have to do, just like the pavements, we have to adjust where the pivot alignment is. So in this case it's on the inside, and then in 3D and perspective view we can go and adjust that further. Now the same thing happens here. This one is slightly unique, where I'm just going to find that horizontal line that we drew earlier. It's going to redraw that for us. And then just isolate. I'm just going to isolate that so we can see what we're doing in 3D. Right, so in this case all we want to do is we want to take this line and similarly sweep it. So again, SW enter, but the only difference is this time that we're going to use a custom shape. So you tick on that, choose pick, hit that, and now you'll see that there are a few things that you still need to adjust. So you might need to rotate it, so you can rotate the angle here to 90 degrees just to get that in alignment. And then if you undo your isolation, you can just manually go and snap it onto your facade. There you go. And the same thing with this, you can perhaps choose this one, which will bring it out. So there you have your molding that you can then go and copy to all of your other windows. So that is it for this lesson. That was just all about lathes and sweeps, and the different types of sweeps, having either a pre-configured bar shape or having a custom shape that you can pick off your CAD geometry. And so we've just had a look at how we create those objects and how we create the custom shapes like these columns here and these sculptural forms. For instance, lighting element here that we can put a glass material on later. So that is it for this lesson, and in the next one we will get into the windows and then start to copy all of these things around.